What's up, cool people? My name's Matt. Welcome back to our Bible study. Alright, so, Deuteronomy chapter 18, carrying on from previous chapters, multiple previous chapters of just like a bunch of guidelines / commands from Moses, many of which are taken from God's previous commands, possibly just, extended, for lack of a better word. Moses adding a little bit more of his own suggestions as an effort to try and help the people keep those commands. But anyway, so yeah, there's going to be a few different subsections here, and each will kind of be its own separate thing. But they're all Moses speaking to the Israelites before they go into the Promised Land, just saying how they should live to be on God's good side, for things to go well with them in the Promised Land, lest, they fall out of God's favor and things not go so well. But anyway, okay, so Deuteronomy 18, here we go. Remember that the Levitical priests, that is, the whole tribe of Levi, will receive no allotment of land among the other tribes in Israel. Instead, the priests and Levites will eat from the special gifts given to the Lord, for that is their share. They will have no land of their own among the Israelites. The Lord himself is their special possession, just as he promised them. So, I forget where that was first brought up. Possibly in Leviticus would make sense, given the whole Levitical priest thing. But, they didn't get their own, broad area of land, I think is more so what this means. When they settle in the Promised Land, eventually they'll have subdivisions of it dedicated to, say, the tribe of Benjamin, or the tribe of Dan, or the tribe of Gad, or whatever. All the different tribes of Israel, aside from Levi, would have their own, almost state, you could say, within the land of Israel. But the Levites would not have that, given that they would have to serve, priestly duties, or at least assist the priests in things. It's better for them to be spread about Israel to help meet the needs of the people who are spread throughout the land. So eventually they would get just individual towns amongst each kind of state, you might say, or amongst each tribe, more accurately. So I think that's more so what it means, because it's not like they would have no land whatever to even live on, but it's just they wouldn't have their own tribal subsection. But anyway, okay, then moving on to verse 3. These are the parts the priests may claim as their share from the cattle, sheep, and goats the people bring as offerings: the shoulder, the cheeks, and the stomach. You must also give to the priests the first share of the grain, the new wine, the olive oil, and the wool at shearing time. For the Lord your God chose the tribe of Levi out of all your tribes to minister in the Lord's name forever. So, this was also part of, the people giving the first of their crops or animals or whatever to God, because part of that went to the Levites and helped them get what they needed throughout the year. And for some reason, I thought there might have been different parts of the animals involved that they would be able to get, but maybe not. Of course, I also tend to... I don't know. I tend to get a little bit mixed up in my head regarding the various laws, especially related to offerings, because there's so many different types that there were laws and commands for. So anyway, but from the animal offerings, they could take the Levites could have these portions. There might have been other portions that also would go specifically to the priests, which would make more sense there. The difference in what I was thinking. Anyway. Okay. Moving on to verse 6. Suppose a Levite chooses to move from his town in Israel, wherever he is living, to the place the Lord chooses for worship. He may minister there in the name of the Lord his God, just like all his fellow Levites who are serving the Lord there. He may eat his share of the sacrifices and offerings, even if he also receives support from his family. So, like I mentioned earlier, there were supposed to be designated towns scattered around the Promised Land for the Levites to live in, but apparently they could also choose to live specifically in the place where, I'm thinking that was ultimately the place where, like, the temple was established and all that kind of stuff. But basically the more central location where everybody, at least certain times of the year, were supposed to go and give their offerings for special events. Why they might choose to move, it doesn't say, because there probably could be a variety of reasons. And there is no judgment being made on whatever those reasons are. So, anyway, that's stuff about priests and Levites. Moving on to the next section, starting in verse 9. When you enter the land the Lord your God is giving you, be very careful not to imitate the detestable customs of the nations living there. For example, never sacrifice your son or daughter as a burnt offering. And do not let your people practice fortune-telling, or use sorcery, or interpret omens, or engage in witchcraft, or cast spells, or function as mediums or psychics, or call forth the spirits of the dead. Anyone who does these things is detestable to the Lord. It is because the other nations have done these detestable things that the Lord your God will drive them out ahead of you. But you must be blameless before the Lord your God. The nations you are about to displace consult sorcerers and fortune-tellers, but the Lord your God forbids you to do such things. So, yeah. And ultimately, when it comes to witchcraft, omens, mediums, other things like that, basically that would have been an attempt to seek something other than God for advice and or, predictions of the future or whatever. Basically, to get an idea of how to possibly respond to something or how they should try and live, maybe. And yeah, obviously God more so wanted the people to seek Him and His will for their lives. Or never make your son or daughter pass through the fire instead of sacrifice your son or daughter as a burnt offering. Which could be a very different thing. There's some people groups, possibly even in this day and age, that have trials of like walking on burning coals and stuff. I don't know if that's quite what's meant here, but still definitely has a different thing. Regarding this section here, yeah, this is kind of another set of instructions that's more so like, hey, here's a bunch of stuff that people who believe in other things do. God doesn't want you to do these things because you're to be different from these people. And especially in this case, it's like, well, because God wants you to put him first rather than, these other people or interpretations or whatever. And further reiterating that it's because of things like this that God is pushing out the other people from the promised land. So, I think we will move along now. Another and I can't talk at the moment. Another subsection here about true and false prophets. There could be a variety of things it has to say here, but let's just read and see what it says. Verse 15. Moses continued, "The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among your fellow Israelites. You must listen to him. For this is what you yourselves have requested of the Lord when you were assembled at Mount Sinai. You said, 'Don't let us hear the voice of the Lord our God anymore, or see this blazing fire, for we will die.'" Yeah, that was referenced before, but because they were afraid to hear from God directly, probably because of the surrounding, like, cloud of fire or whatever. But anyway, they feared hearing from God directly, so Moses acted as an intermediary prophet/interpreter for them. And since Moses was about to die, as he was saying these things, they would have need of another prophet to not hear directly from God while still hearing God's will. Hebrew says Horeb, which is just another name for Sinai. Okay, that was just related to the name of the mountain there. So, God's going to raise up another prophet. No surprise there. And they should listen to him. Because how else are they going to hear from God? Since they didn't want to hear directly. Anyway, then verse 17. Then the Lord said to me, "What they have said is right. I will raise up a prophet like you from among their fellow Israelites. I will put my words in his mouth, and he will tell the people everything I command him. I will personally deal with anyone who will not listen to the messages the prophet proclaims on my behalf. But any prophet who falsely claims to speak in my name, or who speaks in the name of another god, must die." Not surprising there, because the false prophet, whether falsely prophesying in God's name or prophesying for another god, would not be telling the people what God wants. They would be intentionally misleading the people in some way or another. And partially to set an example and make it clear that this is not okay in God's eyes, but also just to get rid of that confusion. That person was to be put to death. Also, it doesn't mention the prophet being raised up. I mean, this might have been worded this way to kind of, keep it relevant in further perpetuity beyond just the next generation. But also, to the best of my knowledge, Joshua, yes, was assigned as sort of like the leader of the Israelites after Moses, but it's not quite stated that he was a prophet in the way that Moses was. So that prophet may very well have been somebody else. That's my memory's not the best on those details, so feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that, but just the generalized wording, like you would think if Joshua was supposed to be the next prophet, that it would mention him and then maybe allude to others after him. Anyway, okay, verse 21, time to wrap up the chapter. But you may wonder, how will we know whether or not a prophecy is from the Lord? If the prophet speaks in the Lord's name, but his prediction does not happen or come true, you will know that the Lord did not give that message. That prophet has spoken without my authority and need not be feared. So, there was a verse in an earlier chapter, not that much earlier though, that mentioned, prophets of other gods and their predictions coming true, but that they still shouldn't follow those gods. So obviously, like, if they're proclaiming something from another god, that's not what the Lord wants for them, therefore, get rid of them. But the gray area, not gray area, but the question of, okay, well, if the prophet says that he's from the Lord, how do we know? Well, if they say they're from the Lord, but any prediction that they make does not come true, then you'll know that they're not really from the Lord. Because if they claim to be a prophet of the Lord, then, any accurate prophecy of God's will should be true. Like, it should come to pass as stated. So that was the indicator of false prophets who would prophesy falsely in God's name. So, that wraps it up for chapter 18 then. So, I kind of wonder if verses 9 through 14 here, all the stuff about mediums and psychics and whatnot, how much a lot of Christians hold to that today. I mean, honestly, in terms of actual serious, questions about our future and things like that, we really should just be consulting God anyway. So, some people just kind of do this sort of thing for fun, supposedly, or like if they're with a group that's doing it for fun or whatever. I'm not going to say like, completely have nothing to do with those situations or anything like that, but like, ultimately, again, if you're looking for real, purpose, meaning, and also like seeking answers to questions about your life and your future and different things like that, if you're a Christian, you should be seeking God first and foremost. Anyway, okay, enough about that. As always, like and share if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell if you're on YouTube to get updates when I post new videos. You can follow me on Rumble if you find me there. I also have information down in the description on different social media pages and where to find those and follow them and all that good stuff. And below the description, you can leave comments with any thoughts you have. So that does it for now. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you for the next video. But until then, stay cool, people.